Peter, let me ask you something right off the bat. How can you justify taking the life of an unborn child? Isn't it a human being from the moment of conception, with its own DNA and potential? How do you reconcile that with the idea of human rights?
Charlie, I think you're oversimplifying a very complex issue. Sure, a fertilized egg has unique DNA, but being human in the biological sense doesn't automatically grant full personhood. The real question is, when does that clump of cells have moral standing? Should it have more rights than the person carrying it? Because when you force someone to carry a pregnancy to term, you're prioritizing a potential life over an actual one.
Clump of cells. That's such a dismissive way to describe what will eventually be a fully formed human being. By your logic, we could justify ending any life at an early stage of development. Isn't that a slippery slope? If we don't defend the most vulnerable, those who can't defend themselves, what does that say about our society?
Oh, come on, Charlie. You're the one using emotional rhetoric to deflect from the real-world implications. What about the woman's life, her future, her health? You talk about defending the vulnerable, but women are often the ones left vulnerable by restrictive abortion laws. Many are forced into poverty, trauma, or even dangerous back-alley abortions because their choice was taken away. You can't just ignore that.
I'm not ignoring it. I absolutely agree we need to do more to support women. Better health care, counseling, financial aid. But why does that support have to come at the expense of another life? You're treating the unborn child like it's a burden or a problem to solve, rather than a human being with rights of its own. Where do you draw the line, Peter? At what point does that clump of cells become a person in your eyes?
Viability is a reasonable line when the fetus can survive outside the womb, usually around 24 weeks. Until then, it's entirely dependent on the woman's body, and that dependency gives her the right to decide whether or not she wants to continue the pregnancy. We don't force people to donate blood or organs to save others, even if it would save a life. Why should pregnancy be any different?
That's a false equivalence. Blood and organ donation don't involve intentionally ending a life. Pregnancy, by its very nature, creates a unique relationship between mother and child. A mother's role is to nurture and protect, not to decide if her child lives or dies. And viability isn't a moral line, it's a technological one. A premature baby can survive earlier today than it could 50 years ago. Should morality depend on medical advancements?
It's not about technology, Charlie. It's about bodily autonomy. No one should be forced to use their body against their will, even for a good cause. Do you think a woman's autonomy suddenly disappears because she becomes pregnant? What if the pregnancy is a result of rape or incest? Are you really going to tell a survivor she has no choice but to endure 9 months of physical and emotional trauma?
I won't pretend those aren't heartbreaking situations. But even in cases of rape or incest, the unborn child is innocent. Why should we punish the child for the crime of the father? That's a tragedy piled on top of another tragedy. Instead of ending the life of the unborn, we should focus on helping the mother heal and providing her with the resources she needs.
That's easy for you to say when you're not the one carrying that trauma, Charlie. You talk about healing like it's a magic wand. For many survivors, forcing them to continue a pregnancy is re-traumatizing. And let's not forget, not every woman has access to the resources you keep mentioning. Adoption isn't a cure-all either. It doesn't erase the physical toll of pregnancy or the psychological burden of being forced to give birth against your will.
But Peter, if we start making exceptions based on circumstances, where does it end? At some point, we have to acknowledge that life, any life, is valuable and worth protecting. Otherwise, we're opening the door to a society where life is disposable, where convenience outweighs morality.
Convenience? That's such a reductive way to frame this issue, Charlie. Do you think women make this decision lightly? Most don't. It's agonizing and deeply personal. What you're suggesting, blanket bans or extreme restrictions, ignores the complexities of individual situations. Who are you or anyone else to decide what's right for someone else's body and future?
It's not about controlling someone's body. It's about recognizing that there are two bodies involved, not just one. We talk about choice, but what choice does the unborn child have? Shouldn't their voice matter too?
And who decides whose voice matters more, Charlie? The law? A judge? A politician? That's the problem. You want to impose your moral beliefs on everyone else, ignoring that not everyone shares your view of when life begins or how to balance competing rights. That's why choice matters. It allows people to make decisions based on their own circumstances and values.
Peter, at some point, society has to draw a line. Otherwise, we risk becoming indifferent to the value of life itself. If we don't stand up for the unborn, who will?
And if we don't stand up for women's rights, Charlie, who will? It's easy to talk about the value of life in abstract terms, but real life is messy and complicated. Until you've walked in someone else's shoes, you have no right to dictate their choices.